morning all of you. So today's in my next lecture, today's next lecture I will describe about transducer. So basically we are already discussing about sensors. So today we are discussing about transducer. So there are different type of transducers which are available. Basically capacitive type, then you can say inductive type transducer. So according to this transducer you can be classified. So there are different type of classification on this transducer. You can say active transducer or you can say passive transducer. Similarly you can say analog transducer or you can say digital transducer. So depending on that your output, we can say this will be whether it will be analog or it will be in the digital form. So basically in the capacitive transducer what happens that both the parallel plate capacitor which will be used in the capacitive transducer and that capacitance value which will be depending on epsilon 0 A by D. So this is a formula for capacitive transducer where which will be effect with this distance. So this distance which will be in between two parallel plate capacitor and A is the area between these two parallel plate capacitor. So what happens if this distance which will be vary, accordingly this capacitance value also vary. So similarly if the area which will be vary, then accordingly that capacitance value which will be vary. Similarly we can say see this active transducer. So active transducer in the sense where this active transducer there will be no need of some electrical input to that transducer, but in case of passive there will be some need of some electrical input to that transducer, then only it will be give you some output. So if you will take some example of passive transducer like resistive transducer, or you can say for example you can say potentiometer or strain gauge. So these are the transducer which will be depending on as a passive transducer. That means they are only depending on some electrical source. So depending on that electrical source it will be give you some output. But in case of active transducer there will be no need of any electrical input to that transducer, but it will be automatically give you some output. So in case of active transducer what happens? If you will be give as a piezoelectric system, so piezoelectrical system that is a active transducer. But in case of passive we can say this is a resistive transducer. So resistive transducer again if you will be give one example like either potentiometer or you can say strain gauge. So that both the case they will be need some electrical input to that system. So potentiometer, as you know that moment of that fan we are using some potentiometer. So that potentiometer again it is of two type. One is a linear potentiometer, another one is a rotational potentiometer. So in case of rotational potentiometer what happens? There is a circuit and in between there will be some resistor which will be there and there will be some wiper connection which will be there. So what happens due to the rotation of your potentiometer, this resistance, this variable resistance which will be vary. So that overall circuit which will be depending on that resistor, it will be change its path. So depending on that speed which will be either increases or it will be decreases. So this potentiometer it is always requires some electrical input, then only it will be acts accordingly. So this is potentiometer which will be type of passive transducer. So in case of analog transducer which will be give you some analog form, but in case of digital it will be give you some digital form. Suppose someone will be in bike, okay, the speed of the bike we can say it will be shown in the digital form. So that means in the digital transducer which will be convert the speed of that bike in your digital output. But in case of analog, so you can look at here, suppose someone will be measuring pressure, suppose car pressure measurement system. So inside that what happens, there will be some indicator. So this indicator which will be analog type, where by looking at that indication we can know that what is that value. Suppose my weight measurement system, so I have to measure my weight. So if I will put my whole body to a system or a weight measurement system, so there it will also look like an analog system. So in analog output, that analog transducer which will be converted into the form of analog output. So this is all type of different transducer. Thank you.